Somewhere out there right now, a video is spreading across every corner of the internet and people cannot stop watching it. Millions of views in less than 48 hours, comment sections flooded, fans breaking down, celebrities going silent, and once you see what's in that footage, you're going to understand exactly why the whole world stopped what it was doing and just stared. Oliver Tree, one of the most unique, polarizing, and genuinely original artists to come out of the last decade. A man who built an entire universe around his art, his image, his music, and his personality. A man who was literally in the middle of his world tour, performing in front of thousands of screaming fans every single night, living out what should have been the greatest chapter of his career. And then, in one devastating moment over the skies of Rio de Janeiro, everything changed. We're talking about a helicopter crash that has shaken the entire music industry to its core. And the fact that footage from those final moments exists and is now going viral across every platform you can think of makes this story hit different than anything we've covered before. So stay locked in, because we are going to break down every single detail of what happened, who Oliver Tree really was beneath that iconic bowl cut and those oversized suits, what was going on with his world tour before that night, and exactly what went wrong thousands of feet above one of the most beautiful cities on earth. This is a story that deserves to be told right, and we're about to tell it. Yo, what's good, fam? Before we get into everything, let me just say this right now. This is not one of those videos where we're here to be disrespectful or chase clout off somebody's pain. We're here to give Oliver Tree his flowers, tell his story the right way, and make sure people understand the magnitude of what happened and who this man really was. Because a lot of people know the character, a lot of people know the memes, the music videos, the school, or the whole aesthetic, but not enough people know the actual human being behind all of it. And right now, with this footage circulating everywhere and people reacting without context, somebody has to step up and give the full picture. So that's what we're doing today. Now, here's what we know for certain. Oliver Tree was in the middle of his world tour, a massive global run that had taken him across North America, through Europe, and down into South America. Rio de Janeiro was supposed to be one of the crown jewel stops on that tour, a massive outdoor venue, tens of thousands of tickets sold, fans who had been waiting years to see this man perform live in their country. The plan was simple: fly in by helicopter from a nearby location, land, do the show, give the people what they came for. Artists do this all the time. It's efficient, it avoids traffic, and it has become almost routine for major touring acts operating at this level. But on this particular night, nothing went according to plan, and now the world is sitting with the weight of what happened, replaying that footage and trying to make sense of something that frankly does not make sense at all. Let's start from the beginning. To understand why this loss hit so hard, you have to understand who Oliver Tree actually was. And I mean really understand, not just the surface level stuff you see when his videos pop up on your timeline. Oliver Tree McHale was born on June 29, 1993 in Santa Cruz, California. And from the very beginning, this dude was wired differently. Santa Cruz itself is a place with its own energy, its own counterculture, its own way of doing things. It's not Hollywood, it's not New York, it's a surf town, an art town, a place where weird is celebrated and conformity is the actual sin. And Oliver soaked all of that up from day one. He started making music as a kid, genuinely young, and he wasn't just messing around, he was studying it. He was obsessive about production, about songwriting, about the way sound could make people feel things. By the time he was a teenager, he was already building a foundation that most artists don't develop until their mid-20s. But here's something that a lot of people don't know about Oliver Tree. Before the music ever took off, before the viral moments in the magazine covers, this man was a legitimately accomplished athlete. We're talking scooter riding at a competitive level. And before you laugh that off, understand that Oliver was one of the best in the world at it. He was competing and winning at a time when that sport was still establishing its identity, and he was a respected and significant figure in that community. That athletic background, that discipline, that willingness to dedicate yourself completely to something the mainstream world doesn't take seriously, that shaped everything about who he became as an artist. It taught him early that you could build something real in a lane that didn't exist yet. He attended University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, where he studied music. And it was there that he really started to develop the full vision of what Oliver Tree was going to be. Not just a music project, not just a YouTube channel, a complete universe with its own rules, its own visual language, its own mythology. The bowl cut started as a bit, an aesthetic choice so extreme it circled back around to being iconic. The oversized suits, the tiny scooter, the deadpan delivery in interviews, none of that was accidental. Oliver Tree built a character that functioned as both a genuine expression of himself and a commentary on the entertainment industry he was entering. He was performing the act of being a pop star while simultaneously deconstructing what a pop star even is. That's a layer of intelligence that a lot of the casual audience never fully caught, but the people who were really paying attention, they saw it. And it made them loyal in a way that fans of more conventional artists rarely are. His breakout moment came with Alien Boy, a track that hit different because it felt like nothing else in the mainstream at that moment. It was melodic but aggressive, emotional but ironic, polished but rough around the edges in all the right ways. The music video went everywhere, and suddenly, Oliver Tree wasn't just a niche internet figure. He was a genuine crossover presence who was making people feel things they couldn't quite explain. From there, the discography started building into something real. Ugly is Beautiful dropped in 2020, and it was a statement. A full album that wore its contradictions on its sleeve and dared the listener to sit with the discomfort of feeling something genuine, while also feeling like they were in on a joke. That balance is incredibly hard to pull off, and Oliver did it in a way that very few artists have ever managed. He followed that up with Cowboy Tears in 2023, which showed an entirely different side of him. More vulnerable, more straightforward in its emotional delivery, less interested in irony and more interested in just saying the true thing directly. It divided some of his fan base because that's what genuine artistic evolution does. But it also deepened the respect that the music industry had for him as a real artist rather than just a viral personality. And through all of it, he remained genuinely independent in his thinking. He was signed to Atlantic, but he operated on his own terms in a way that very few artists at his level managed to maintain. He pushed back on timelines, he fought for creative control, he used his platform to talk about mental health, about the pressures of the industry, about the way social media distorts reality and damages people. He was self-aware in a way that was rare, and he used that self-awareness to actually help the people who were listening feel less alone. That was Oliver Tree, not the bowl cut, not the meme, the actual human being who cared deeply about his art and about the people who connected with it. Now let's talk about this tour because context here matters a lot. Oliver Tree had been building toward this world tour for years. This wasn't a quick cash grab or a label mandated press run. This was something he had been planning, designing, and pouring himself into as a full creative project. The stage production, the set list, the visual elements, all of it was crafted with the same obsessive attention to detail that he brought to everything else. The tour kicked off in North America and immediately started generating the kind of word of mouth that artists pray for. Videos from the shows were spreading online, not just clips of the music, but genuine human moments between Oliver and his audience that reminded people why live music matters. Fans who had loved him from a distance for years were finally getting to be in the same room with the energy he put into his recordings, and they were overwhelmed by it in the best way. From North America, the tour moved into Europe, London, Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin. Each stop was selling out. The production was getting rave reviews. And Oliver himself, by all accounts from people inside the touring camp, was in the best headspace he'd been in for years. He was healthy, focused, and genuinely energized by the response he was getting for audiences across different cultures and countries. That's something that live touring does to artists when it's going right. It fills them up. It reminds them why they started. South America was the final major leg, and Rio de Janeiro was circled on the calendar as something special. Brazil has an incredibly passionate music fan base, and South American crowds are known worldwide for bringing an energy that European and North American audiences often can't match. The combination of Oliver Tree's theatrical performance style and a Brazilian crowd that had been waiting years for this was something the entire touring team was genuinely excited about. The show was booked for an outdoor venue with a capacity in the tens of thousands. Tickets had sold out almost immediately. Fan communities in Brazil had been organizing for months, coordinating meetups, learning lyrics phonetically in English, doing everything that deeply invested fans do when something they love is finally coming to them. People had saved money specifically for this night, driven hours from other cities. The anticipation was real, the excitement was electric. and none of them had any idea what the night was actually going to bring. Now here's where we have to talk about what actually happened, and I want to be careful here because out of respect for everyone involved, we're going to deal in what's known rather than speculation. The plan for that evening involved Oliver Tree traveling to the venue by helicopter. This is not unusual. Major touring artists at this level frequently use helicopter transport, especially in cities like Rio, where traffic can be genuinely paralyzing, and moving an entire production team through urban congestion creates real scheduling problems. The helicopter option allows for precise timing and has become a standard part of how large-scale tours operate in major international cities. The helicopter departed with Oliver Tree and several members of his team on board. Rio de Janeiro from the air is one of the most stunning views on earth. The city wrapping around mountains, the ocean stretching to the horizon, Christ the Redeemer lit up against the night sky, the lights of thousands of neighborhoods blending together into something that looks almost unreal from above. It's the kind of view that stays with you. But somewhere in that flight, something went catastrophically wrong. The specific mechanical or situational failure that caused the crash is still being investigated by Brazilian aviation authorities, and we are not going to speculate on causes that haven't been confirmed. What we know is that the helicopter went down. The footage that is now circulating everywhere, the footage that has been shared millions of times across every platform, captures the moment the aircraft lost stability and descended, and it is devastating to watch, which is exactly why so many people have found themselves unable to look away and simultaneously unable to reconcile what they're seeing with the reality that this was an actual human being in those final moments. Witnesses on the ground describe hearing the aircraft before they saw it clearly. That particular change in engine sound that tells you something is wrong even before your eyes confirm it. Emergency services were dispatched immediately. The response from local authorities was fast by any standard. But in situations like this, fast is not always enough. The crash site and the circumstances of the descent meant that what should have been a routine approach to one of the greatest shows of Oliver Tree's career became instead the worst night the music world had experienced in years. The show never happened. Fans who had gathered at the venue began receiving information in fragments, the way information always spreads in crisis situations. Incomplete pieces assembling into a picture nobody wanted to see. Social media was running ahead of any official statement, as it always does now, and the footage captured by people who happened to be in the area began spreading before anyone could process what they were even looking at. The music industry went quiet in a way it almost never does. Artists who have feuded publicly said nothing. Labels went dark. Streaming platforms began replacing curated content with tribute playlists. The reaction was global, immediate, and real in a way that cuts through all the noise and just sits with you. Now let's talk about something that's been on everybody's mind since this happened, because it speaks to something bigger than just this one tragedy. Helicopter travel, when operated by experienced pilots using properly maintained aircraft following established safety protocols, is statistically quite safe. Commercial aviation in general has become extraordinarily safe over the past several decades through relentless improvement in technology, training, and regulation. Helicopter travel carries slightly more variability than fixed-wing aircraft due to the mechanical complexity of rotary systems, but the overall risk profile for a professional charter helicopter in normal operating conditions is genuinely low, which is exactly what makes situations like this one so difficult for the human mind to process. We are not built to accept statistical randomness as an explanation for the loss of someone we cared about. Our brains look for meaning, for pattern, for causation. We want to understand why, and the honest answer in cases like this is that sometimes it's simply a catastrophic convergence of specific factors that no individual decision could have anticipated or prevented. That's not satisfying. That's not the kind of closure we want, but it is often the truth. Think about it from a pure numbers standpoint. Oliver Tree had been touring for months. He and his team had made dozens of logistical decisions every single day, any one of which could have theoretically led somewhere different city, different routing, different mode of transport on a given night. The number of variables that had to align in exactly the wrong way for this specific outcome to occur is genuinely staggering. The probability of any one thing going wrong is low. The probability of every specific thing going wrong in exactly this sequence is almost incomprehensibly small. And yet here we are, because that is how probability actually works in the real world. Low probability events happen. They happen to people who have done everything right. They happen at the worst possible moments, at the peaks of things when there is the most to lose. There is a particular cruelty in tragedies that arrive at moments of peak joy and forward momentum. Oliver Tree was not in a dark place. He was not struggling in the ways that have claimed other artists before him. He was in the middle of something that was working, something that felt like the reward for years of creative sacrifice and courage. He was on his way to perform for people who loved him in a city that was ready to receive him with open arms. The trajectory was upward in every conceivable way. And that is what makes the randomness so brutally hard to accept. This is also a big part of why the footage has spread the way it has. Human beings are drawn to that which we cannot fully process. We return to images that our brains haven't finished digesting. There's a psychological explanation for why traumatic footage spreads virally. And it's not primarily about morbid curiosity, it's about the collective attempt to make real something that still doesn't feel real. When something this significant happens to someone this public, millions of people are experiencing a grief response simultaneously, and they are processing it through the only tool immediately available, which is the screen in front of them. But the footage is not the story. The footage is the moment the story ended. And Oliver Tree's story deserves to be remembered in its fullness, not reduced to its final seconds. The reaction from the music industry in the hours and days following the crash says something important about the kind of figure Oliver Tree had quietly become. Artists operating in completely different genres, people who on the surface had nothing in common with Oliver Tree stylistically or aesthetically, came forward to share what he had meant to them. And the recurring theme in every single tribute was authenticity. People kept returning to that word. He was real. He was the real thing. Even wrapped in layers of irony and performance and character, the thing underneath was genuine, and people felt it even when they couldn't fully articulate why. That's not something you can manufacture. You cannot build a lasting career out of authenticity if you don't have it at your core. Because audiences are better lie detectors than most artists give them credit for being. People can feel the difference between someone who is performing emotion and someone who is performing emotion that comes from a genuinely real place. Oliver Tree was always the second kind. His influence on the generation of artists who came up behind him is already real and significant, and it will only become more visible as time passes. The permission he gave young artists to be weird, to be contradictory, to refuse to fit neatly into the categories the industry tries to force people into, that is a contribution that doesn't show up in chart positions but is absolutely lasting. The conversations about mental health and industry pressure he pushed into spaces where they hadn't existed honestly before. The vulnerability he showed at moments when it had a real personal cost. All of that leaves a mark on the culture that outlasts any individual song. His catalog is going to sound different now the way it always does when an artist is no longer here to add to it. Tracks that felt like chapters in an ongoing story will now be heard as part of a completed body of work. And that recontextualization changes how the music lands. People are going to discover Oliver Tree for the first time through this tragedy, and those new listeners are going to find something that holds up completely on its own terms, without needing the context of loss to make it meaningful. That's how you know the work was real. That's how you know it lasts. At the end of the day, no amount of analysis changes what this is. At its core, this is a loss, a real one. A human being who spent his life pouring himself into his art and into his connection with the people who listen to it is gone. And the world genuinely is a smaller, stranger, less interesting place for it. Oliver Tree was one of those artists who made you feel like it was okay to be exactly the thing you were, even if the thing you were didn't fit anywhere comfortable. He built a lane for himself when no existing lane would have him, and then he filled that lane with some of the most genuinely original creative work of his generation. The footage that is circulating is going to keep circulating because that is the nature of the world we live in now. But we owe it to him and to ourselves to make sure that what we carry forward is not the final seconds but the full picture. The kid from Santa Cruz who rode scooters at a world-class level and made music that sounded like nothing else and refused to be anything other than exactly what he was. The artist who turned his contradictions into his greatest creative strength. The performer who could walk out in front of tens of thousands of strangers in a foreign country and make every single one of them feel like he was speaking directly to them. That's Oliver Tree. The real version, not the meme, not the footage, the full thing. The real question now is how the culture processes a loss like this, how it holds space for grief while honoring the legacy, How it prevents the footage from becoming the shorthand for a life that was so much more than its ending. The answer is exactly what we tried to do today. Tell the full story. Start at the beginning. Remind people who he was before the world knew his name. And then sit with the weight of what it means that he is not going to be here to keep surprising us, keep challenging us, keep giving us music that sounds like nothing else. That's what he deserved when he was here, and it's what he deserves now. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what Oliver Tree meant to you, which song hit you first, which moment made you a fan, what you're going to carry with you from his catalog going forward. And check out the video on screen for more content like this. We're going to keep doing this the right way. Stay up, fam. We'll see you in the next one. But let's take a step back for a second and talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough when we lose artists at moments like this. Because there's a conversation happening right now underneath all the tributes and the viral footage and the streaming numbers spiking on this catalog. And it's a conversation that matters. We live in an era where the relationship between artists and their audience has fundamentally changed. Social media collapsed the distance. You don't just listen to an artist's music anymore. You watch them wake up. You watch them travel. You see them frustrated and excited and uncertain and proud. You follow the process in real time. And that closeness, as beautiful as it can be, creates something complicated when loss happens. Because suddenly millions of people are grieving someone they never met but feel like they genuinely knew. And there is no established script for how to do that. Oliver Tree understood this dynamic better than almost anyone at his level. He was deliberate about what he shared and what he protected. He gave people enough access to feel connected without ever letting the performance fully overtake the person. That's a balance that very few artists in the social media era have managed to find, and the ones who don't find it often pay a serious price in terms of their mental health and their relationship with their own identity. He talked openly about that tension, about the way being a public figure in the current landscape requires you to constantly manage the distance between the persona and the self, about the cost of that management over time. And he used those conversations not to complain or to push people away, but to bring his audience into a more honest relationship with what they were actually consuming when they engage with his content. That kind of transparency is rare, and it is part of why the grief response to his loss has been so intense and so personal for so many people who never stood in the same room as him. They felt like they knew him because, to a degree that most artists never allow, they actually did. The other thing this moment is forcing a conversation about is the physical realities of touring at this scale. The logistical demands that major international tours place on artists and their teams are genuinely extreme in ways that the audience rarely sees or thinks about. The travel, the time zone changes, the constant reconfiguration of technical setups and venues with different specifications, the interpersonal pressure of living and working in close proximity with the same group of people for months at a time, the psychological weight of performing at a high emotional level night after night while managing everything else simultaneously. Artists don't talk about this enough publicly, partly because the romanticization of touring is baked into the mythology of music, and nobody wants to be the one to break that spell, and partly because complaining about getting to do what you love in front of people who love it feels like ingratitude. But the reality is that touring at the level Oliver Tree was operating at is genuinely demanding in ways that create real risks. Not just the obvious ones like helicopter transport, but the quieter ones around fatigue and decision making and the accumulated weight of months away from normal life. That's not a reason to stop making music or stop touring. That music and those performances clearly meant the world to him and to the people who experienced them. But it is a conversation worth having, honestly, because the people who work in this industry and the artists who drive it deserve better than a culture that romanticizes the grind without acknowledging what it actually costs. Oliver Tree would have had something to say about all of this. That's the thing about losing someone who was genuinely articulate and self-aware and willing to say the uncomfortable true thing. You don't just lose the person, you lose all the future conversations they would have had, all the future perspectives they would have offered, all the future music they would have made that would have changed how you understood something. That accumulating absence is its own particular kind of loss, and it sits alongside the immediate grief in a way that only grows over time rather than fading. His next album was going to be something. You could feel it in the way the current tour was being received, in the energy he was bringing to the shows, and the creative confidence that people close to him described in the weeks leading up to Rio. Whatever he was building toward next, whatever chapter was coming after this tour ended and he went home and sat down with the work again, we are not going to get to hear it. And that loss is real, Even though it is the loss of something that never fully existed yet, that's the nature of losing an artist who was still in the middle of becoming something. You grieve not just what was, but what was clearly on its way.